everybody. Welcome to Mentor Me's first career path panel. We have with us today Chetna and Divya, and I'm so glad that you guys could make it. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Chetna. I am currently in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm going to law school at Harvard. I'm in my second year, and I am originally from Assam before I moved to boarding school in Bangalore, which is where I met Divya as well. And I'm really looking forward to answering some questions today.
Hi guys, I'm Divya. I am from a lot of parts in India. I was born in Chennai, moved around a lot, grew up for a while in the Czech Republic, and then of course TISB, woohoo! I did my undergrad at Brown University in the States and worked there for a year, and now I'm at the LSE completing my master's in international development and applied development economics. So yeah, looking forward to answering questions about graduate school, working in the US, anything you want to know. Because I'll just add that I was a career advisor for a year at Brown, so I'm happy to answer any sort of international student related questions, visas, etc. I think COVID really has very significantly changed what a normal day looks like for me at graduate school. So I can give you both sides of it, because I'm sure that when people get to this point, hopefully we will not be in this pandemic anymore. Pre-COVID, I think with a master's at a place like LSE, so kind of thinking about a one-year master's, you have to be aware of the fact that things are going to be really fast-paced, because most institutions in the US will do a two-year master's. You have some more time to think about career goals, what do you want to do, that kind of thing. But a place like any institution in the UK, you're really coming into it already knowing what you want to do. So, and that's kind of why you will pursue a master's here. So I was basically in class for, I think, 6 to 8 hours a day, because I front loaded my semester. So that included not just classes, but career sessions, chats with professionals in the field that our university organized for us, that kind of thing. And really spending some of the spare time getting some work done, making some food, and that was about it. I mean, I think my first term was really busy, COVID or not. And because it's 1 year, if you're really thinking about a career in the same geographical location or otherwise, you have to start planning ahead with your career. So yeah, a lot of my day and weekends did involve a lot of career planning, reaching out to people, chatting with them, doing resumes, all that kind of stuff, and getting ready for the upcoming recruitment year. As soon as COVID hit, I did leave. I went back home for a little bit because our dorm situations were not conducive to socially distanced living, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was basically just writing a dissertation from home, which is not fun. I don't recommend it. If you can find another way of doing it, do it. But I got through it, and here we are.
So I think echoing a lot of what Divya said, there is also a marked difference in law school between your first year and second year. And I think regardless of if COVID had happened or not, my second year would look very different to my first year of law school. But again, I'll do the same thing. I mean, in effect, like, you are in classes pretty much 20 hours a week or something like that, a little bit more. It was a change for me from undergrad because I also went to LSE for undergrad. So I'm kind of familiar with the system there. And I think with undergrad, they're really way more lax. So I'm sure grad school at LSE is very different in a lot of ways. But law school's a completely different ball game. You are in class, and when you're not in class, you're reading. So you're actually, I think this is the most work I've done academically is in the last year of my life, just because law school is very taxing. Having said that, I think there's also so much that you do, like, beyond the academic side of things. Like, you will be doing career services because you're primarily in law school because you want to be a lawyer and because you want to practice. Or if not, then you're at least discovering what you want to do that involves you using this degree in some way. I mean, you're not coming into law school just, for the heck of it. Like, it is a commitment. I think it's pretty much that. You just have to, my day would usually start with like classes for 3 or 4 hours. And then I would have events, either lunch talks with professionals in the field, or it would be career services related talks, or just sort of And then it's the reading aspect of the day and preparing for your next classes, because law school has a system where you get called on, so you actually need to read for class because you're going to get called on. And you don't want to look like an idiot in front of 80 people when you don't know what you're talking about. And yeah, and I think with COVID, obviously, I think the preparation aspect and the reading aspect still exists. What does change in the second year of law school, and what has changed for me, is that my credit load is way lower this time around. So in your fall semester, at least at Harvard, you have to take 18 credits, which is a pretty heavy load for the first semester. And now, I mean, I'm taking about 13 credits. So my workload reduces dramatically, and that's pretty much across the board. I'm not doing it this semester, but I will be doing it next semester, where you can take like practical courses, so you can work with a clinic and effectively provide legal services under a supervising attorney. So sort of in addition to taking academic classes, you can start getting that practical work experience. So, I mean, your day just starts kind of changing depending on how you want to structure law school and what you want to get out of it. I actually knew like quite early on that I wanted to go to law school. I think around the time I was graduating from TISB, I sort of knew that that was on the cards for me. I just didn't want to do it straight away as an undergraduate degree, which is why I chose to do international relations and history instead. I thought it would give me insight into the parts of the legal system that I may be interested in later, and that it would sort of give me the analytical tools that I needed to do a law degree. And I think it has been really useful in both those respects. A lot of my interests now come from my undergraduate degree, wanting to do international law, understanding like the international legal system. um, that's definitely a carryover from my undergraduate degree. And I think the skills I picked up in school, like when I was in undergrad, were, you know, sort of the research and the writing and the ability to like make coherent arguments. And I think those are really important skills, at least for me in law school. So yeah, it's definitely been a very big influence coming into law school. And I think, but having said that, I have met people who've come from fields that you wouldn't necessarily think translate into law school. So this is not to say that, you know, you kind of preclude yourself by doing another thing. Like, I mean, people do STEM and like engineering and come to law school. It's really what drives you and what do you want to get out of your law school experience. For me, this has been my journey, but I don't think it's indicative of what kind of brings you to law school.
Yeah, I think that's quite funny actually, because I started at Brown as an English major and very quickly switched to international relations because I had a similar idea of, you know, I'll complete my 4 years at Brown, I'll do law school. I think for me, I had to reconsider law school in the US just because the sort of visa climate for international students has very steadily changed. And I think I was a little bit more hesitant when I was making my decision at the time to commit to something that may or may not completely fruitify in the future for me. So this has kind of been like a soft landing, and it's definitely not, hopefully, the last degree I'll have. But you know, to have you know, an IR degree from a very prestigious place means that you're doing some really rigorous work during your undergraduate years. So for me, my coursework included economics, history, sociology, a language, political science, anthropology. It was everything you could imagine. And the department really invested its time in making sure you develop certain analytical abilities to write, to read, to research. And I think what was really different about Brown in specific was that you really developed a language skill. So like most of us came out of the program fluent in another language. And I think that it's too early in your freshman year to really know what you want to do 4 to 5 years later. But to slowly sort of use that process of going through school and seeing what you like to kind of guide you to kind of figure out what that might be that you want to do next. So I definitely came into the program here being one of the younger people in the program. I think most of the people who are in the program currently are actually a little bit older, and that's because they have field experience to supplement their undergraduate experience. For me, it was just 4 years at Brown, 1 year of working at Brown, and then I started here. So I think I echo a lot of what Chetna said in terms of your analytical abilities to research, write, and read really kind of have carried me through to where I am now. So I can speak to the American system because I understand it better. And I think Brown is a little bit of an outlier because we don't have any core classes. So at a place like Brown, you can really just pursue whatever you want. And like the maximum course load for a particular major would be, I believe somewhere close to 20 courses out of the 32 that you can take during your undergraduate experience. So I think what I'd say is sort of to generalize to the rest of the American college experiences, when you're choosing, a college, while you base it on your major, at the same time, look at the interesting courses that you can take outside of it. And I think that that's where you really begin to develop skills that are interchangeable. So for example, like with the freedom we had at Brown, I really chose to pursue, learning Spanish as fluently as I could. And I could do that because I had the freedom to, pick and choose what I wanted to do. At the same time, I was aware that to sort of be more employable at places like development consultancies and think tanks, the kind of stuff I wanted to do in the future, I need some sort of analytical skills, using quantitative research and that kind of stuff. So I made sure I looked through the methodology department to see what they had available that would set my skill set. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when you pursue looking at a college as a high schooler, while your major is important, and yes, definitely, try and stay up to mark with the trends in the workplace. I mean, if you're really looking to, go into tech or business or whatever it is, like really know what people are looking for if you're looking for employability, and kind of curate what you can that way, because college really is sort of like a menu of courses once you get there, and you get to pick and choose what you want to put in your plate and what you want to take forward. So that's kind of my advice on the American system.
Yeah, and I think picking up on especially your point about employability, I think that's often not a thought that crosses our minds when we're 18. It's you don't think that far into the future, and I think, I mean, I'll make this point and then I'll speak more generally about the UK system. But I do think that the best advice I could have gotten at 18 was really think about what you're going to do with your degree. I mean, have some sort of a plan. Um, I think as long as you're interested in what you are doing and you can see it leading to something, it doesn't have to be like a traditional career path, but you can see where your degree would be useful. I think that would be sort of the best thing for you, especially as I think like Divya mentioned this a couple of questions ago, this is not the climate that's the most favorable to international students who want to like stay and work. And you really have to think about, where is my degree going to take me? Am I going to be employed by someone who's going to be able to give me a visa? And I think these questions sort of entered into the calculus for me a little later into my undergraduate degree. And then I mean, things worked out in a way that I had the experience I wanted to have overseas. And but it was something that I had to work extra hard for because my degree didn't automatically translate into a job at the end of the day, which is not to say that your degree should, but that you should, I think, have a plan about what you want to do with it. I think what often happens is you really get swayed by your interests, and then you get to college and you discover other interests. And so I think that's the distinction. With the UK, it's really a lot more rigid in what you can and cannot take. You really can't change majors. It's not an option. I personally really like that. I wanted that kind of structure in my degree. I felt like within the confines of my degree, I was still able to do everything I wanted to do. So like Divya said, like I took a language outside my degree, and I took my additional course load as well, and just did a language on the side because I didn't want to do it in the confines of my degree. But at least at LSE in my first year, I really didn't have a choice with the courses I could take. Like it was pretty much set for me. Then in your second and third year, you have a little more flexibility with the kind of courses you pick, but there's still a minimum requirement to do the courses that your degree needs. And then that's like a list of courses that you can pick from. And you just can't change majors, or at least if you could, it would be like I could go from international relations and history to just international relations or just history. Like I couldn't sort of do like economics suddenly. It wasn't going to work. And I think that's also because each sort of stream in the UK has its own entry requirements, and you have to meet those entry requirements with your IB grades. So um, but having said that, I also look back on undergrad and I think that so many of my experiences just came from outside the learning setting of my undergraduate degree. And so much of all the choices I have made since have been a product of that. Um, so while your major is important, it's not the be all end all. You will sort of like discover your interests and you will sort of gravitate towards the things that excite you more. I mean, for me, it was realizing that honestly, you can really push yourself mentally. Like, I had a big jump because I went from CBSE to TISB to the IB system. And that was a really big change for me, especially with some of the HL courses I was taking, like English, because you were suddenly adapting to a completely different style of writing. Like, CBSE doesn't teach you to write that way. But I think one of the things that I learned at the ISB was, there is really no limit to your capacity as a human being to adapt and learn in circumstances. And I think going into the first year of LSE and coming here, I was sort of like, I'll be okay and I'll be fine and I know how to do that. And the other thing is just waking up early. Like, there's so many more hours in your day if you wake up early. And though I hated it in school, like, I do credit that to a lot of like things that I've been able to do since. It's just, having more productivity in my day and not needing to sleep in. Yeah, TLD was the setting stone for a lot. Like, it sort of like gave you those like initial like research and writing skills. And that was just the HL courses I took. And that sort of like has developed over the years. So I think that's the best thing I can think of.
That's a great answer.
I have quite a few good things to say about TISB, as traumatic the time was. But no, I mean, frankly, I think you're right in saying that we had some really good habits instilled into us in a very sort of forced manner. And I think some of us came out of it really rebelling, and then some of us came out of it eventually really absorbing that. So for me, I mean, the kind of structure we had in boarding school where you'd wake up at like X time and you'd work through the day till X time, and then you'd go and play a sport and then get your dinner and go to bed. I kind of still very much maintain that, and it's weirdly in the same rhythm of the go to school at 8, come back at 4, work out at X time, and I think about it often that it's somehow just stuck. And it's to say that having a routine is really important to kind of structure your day when you have the freedom in graduate school and law school to go get a coffee or to instead study for a bit, and to kind of make those decisions in a very rational way. I think the second experience that has really sort of helped me, I think Vivum. I mean, I know, and being head girl at the time, like, as much as it sounds superficial, those people skills really started at that time. And those leadership experiences for me really started at that time. And I think I carried it through because it helped me leverage a certain amount of confidence when I was speaking publicly. I mean, and it's not to say that I'm a very confident person, but there's just a certain sort, and maybe it's the drama degree that I had as well, or the amount of drama I did at school, that it just, that's how it translated into my future life, where I felt like I was constantly performing. And I say that because I worked some really interesting, part-time positions at Brown that I don't think I could have gotten unless I had those very formative leadership experiences when I was much, much younger. And it kind of had to become a natural momentum in my life. So, I worked to, start a particular initiative, or like worked with some really prominent people who were coming to Brown, that kind of stuff. I just don't think I'd have had the confidence to do that unless I kind of had those formative experiences. So yeah. And I'll try and generalize this so that it's not just very specific to my experience. I think coming out of undergrad, and when you take some time to sort of think about what you want to do next and you go into your graduate degree, you have some time to think about what you need to make up for. And I think what my best experience at LSE was mostly informed by the fact that I was making up for a skill I lacked by a certain class sequence I took. So, I fled the economics classes that I should have probably taken at Brown because I was like, numbers, no, I don't want to do this right now. But 4 years later, comes smacks you back in your head and says, no, sorry, you want to be employable, you probably need to do this. So I took a sequence of development economics classes at the LSE that were probably the best decision I took. And it was mostly just because I was being challenged in a very different way than I had been before to think analytically. And I think what I mean by that is to be very precise about what I'm trying to argue, because that's what sort of the development economics sequence did for me. Whereas I think with, the softer subjects, the history and the anthropology, the kind of writing style is very different. So even if you're sort of just focusing on something like writing, like what types of writing skills are you learning and how are you doing the research to do that writing? And then the second component that really, really stood out for me during my graduate school experience was I had a sort of work class component. So we did a consultancy project where we teamed up with a local organization, NGO that, needed to basically understand how to reform its growth strategy. So the four of us classmates basically got together and we did this project for a good, I believe, 6 to 7 months. And at the end of it, presented our recommendations to them. So I think what I'm getting at is having a sort of practical component to my graduate school degree has really been useful. And while it's very well built into most master's degrees in the US, it's not necessarily so in the UK. So if you're looking to pursue that degree, elsewhere where it's not as structured as in the US, look for those practical components when you're applying to that degree.
Okay. Yeah, I think similarly for me, graduate school has really been about how do you learn things that you didn't already learn, and how do you sort of diversify your what you can bring to the table. Which is why I think most of my interesting classes have been in subjects that I didn't really touch on until I got to law school. I think like I'm taking a course this semester on corporations, which is effectively corporate law, and I hadn't done that before. And I think at this point, since I'm still deciding, like, do I want to be a litigator? Do I want to be like a corporate lawyer? I think it's been really useful. And I think which is also why I encourage people to, when you think about grad school, to think about like, what do you want out of your degree? Like, where is that going to fill the gaps in your skill set? And what do you really want to take out of it? And then the second point, I think I haven't had this experience yet, but I do think the practical aspect of grad school and actually getting to see the work you do in practice is going to be a really interesting part of the experience for me next semester. I sort of had that this summer because I did intern with a local legal, like nonprofit law firm. So I think that's definitely been like seeing the work you do come into practice is going to be a really interesting part of grad school as well. I mean, I mostly think it's been a positive experience. Obviously, it is a stressful experience, and I think that goes without saying. But I worked for 2 years between undergrad and law school, and I feel like that was a more stressful period of my life in so many ways than law school is. And I think with law school, it affects your lifestyle in that you probably will have to change what your interests look like a little bit. I mean, I used to really love to read just fiction, and I used to really love to travel. And I think both of those things are more possible in your undergraduate or work setting. I think in law school, especially being in the States, I mean, compared to Europe where I was living, it's not easy to just move around as much. So it does affect your lifestyle in that way. But I think, I still have time to do the things I'm interested in. I've still had time to cultivate like relationships with people here, keep in touch with my family. So it doesn't affect your lifestyle in a negative way, I would say. It's tweaks that you have to make. And I think that I don't know if this, I think this translates into most grad degrees. And I think that's just a product of getting older as well. Um, and I think with my mental health, obviously, it is challenging, and it is even more so now when you are sort of doing classes online. And I hope that this isn't something that translates into a lot of people's experiences like a year or two down the line, because, then we have bigger problems. But it's, I think that's another thing, is being cognizant of mental health as an issue. And I think taking steps to check in and starting that early in your life is important. And it's not something that is a taboo subject. You should talk about it, you should speak to someone about it. I was a peer supporter through undergrad, and I think it was really helpful for the people I spoke to. At least I hope so. And I think, um, as long as I mean, the fact that you asked me that question is indicative of the fact that people are thinking about this in a way that I think when I was 18, maybe I didn't think about it as like, you need to check in and make sure you're okay. And yeah, so I think anything that grad school throws at you, as long as you sort of know what your boundaries are and where you stand like mentally, I think you'll be okay.
I think the biggest positive of being in school is just being in school. Like, you have such endless bounds to explore for yourself without, you can fail in a way that you cannot fail in a job or like life as easily because of the consequences. Whereas in grad school, I think you can really take some more risks. Than it's sort of a simulated environment, right, where people want you to succeed. So I think that's probably the biggest positive of being in school, because I clearly love school. But I mean, for me, I think I've been very fortunate in terms of the mental health conversation, because my mom's a therapist. Brown was really a place that cultivated you to kind of constantly be thinking about those things and checking in. I, served as a women's peer counselor, a mentor at Brown, several different positions. And so I think that was sort of just ingrained in me, starting at undergrad. Needless to say, it's a very important subject to pay attention to, on an individual level, but also on sort of a communal level. And you're fortunate if you have a school that does that for you. But otherwise, it's important to sort of have those practices in place that will, ultimately help you be successful in the long term. So, I mean, I think for the first half of my grad school, I don't think I was paying enough attention to my mental health, and most of it was because I was so career driven at the time that it was kind of a do or die situation, or that's at least how I treated it. And COVID happened, and it really taught me that there are going to be so many hurdles in your way that you're just really not going to be able to just go at something and say, this is all I care about, and everything else can take a hike for a little bit. So relearning to cultivate the better experiences. I started sort of meditating every day. I mean, it's just the things you have to put in place when when the world is going through such a difficult time, and you will as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess the message really is you have to find the things that work for you, that will give you some peace and space per day. Keep it as a practice, make it a routine. And that will propel you to more mindful success in the future. No, I think mine will be quite an unconventional answer, because I don't think my challenges were so much with the process itself, but the circumstances that propelled me to pursue grad school. And again, this sort of speaks to my very unfortunate situations with visa experiences that I've had, where, I was working a job at Brown. I really was supposed to get sponsored and continue working there for a little longer, but things changed very last minute, and at that point in time, I had to take a rather rushed decision on whether what it was I needed to do next. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the challenge really was making the right decision in a short amount of time. And you will be put in those situations many a times in your life. So practice it. um, at that point in time, really learning really quickly about what programs were still open. So it was February, nothing was still open in the US for applications. I had to do my research really quickly for programs in the UK that I would actually probably like, and that would sort of speak to what I wanted to do next. And to really understand an alien process. I mean, I didn't do the UCAS when I was at TISB. I'd never done the UK process. And to really understand how the systems work very, very differently. I mean, I think the US gives a lot more priority to sort of your personality and your story and that kind of stuff. And you shouldn't probably talking about that in your personal statement in a UK process. And these are things that you just kind of have to pick up and go with it. So I think that personally, that was my biggest challenge. But I guess sort of the bigger picture thing is to say that be prepared that life will throw challenges at you that you're not ready for, and take it in your stride.
You said something about the alien process, which really resonated with me. And I think applying to law school as an international student who also didn't do undergrad in the US was a very challenging experience, because back when I started thinking about it, it just seemed like there were so many hurdles along the way. And I think that's a part. And I think for me, the benefit of the grad school process was that I knew exactly what kind of degree I wanted to do, and like I had narrowed down my options. It was more sort of how do I get there and what do I have to do along the way, because I had to, get my degree from LSE converted into like an American system, and there was like a way of doing that. I had to take the LSAT. I had to make law school applications, and I mean it was a process, and there weren't a lot of people out there who were doing this, so there was really no resources. And I think, to generalize now, what I have learned from that is that um, you know research was really key. I reached out to people that I found on LinkedIn who were sort of had done this, and I've made some really long lasting connections actually along the way from that, because I met someone who was also at LSE and who was then at Georgetown, and he sort of like really walked me through the process and like gave me an idea of what it looked like. And I think that's pretty much the challenge of applying to grad school. The first step is really to figure out what you want to do, and then the second step is to figure out how do you get there. And then I think, as a related concern for a lot of international students, should be, well, what do I do? How do I stay in the country? Is that an option? And if I cannot, then what is my backup option? Because that was a really, I think when you said this about law school, Divya, in the beginning, like I can't tell you how much I thought about it. Like, it was like, what do you do with this degree if you can't stay in the US? And you need to think about that. This isn't like, grad school is really important in that if you cannot use your degree, it's been pretty much like, an extra period of your life that you've put towards something that's no longer of practical use. And I think having those difficult conversations with yourself at the outset will give you clarity coming into grad school, and like really knowing, if I cannot do this, then I can do that. And again, like in your research process, you will come across people who've probably done this and are like 5 or 6 years ahead of you and can kind of talk you through the process. And I think that's, I think, the challenge of the grad school application experience, but also the benefits along the way that you kind of get from it, is that you really, at least for me, I got a lot of clarity about what I wanted to do with my degree and what I would do in case staying in the US wasn't an option in a couple of years. Okay, so I think for LSE, I think the one thing I did not realize, and this may be a product of my degree, was that you will really have to work towards figuring out what your career is going to look like independently. And career services is really great at LSE if you want to do law, or if you want to do banking, or if you want to do finance. Like, they will get you. I mean, I had friends who did accounting and finance and who are like investment bankers now. It's great for that. I think if you do a more um, arts degree at LSE, you will really have to be the sort of engineer of your own life. And like, career services can kind of listen to you and like give you advice and maybe tell you that's a good strategy, that's not a good strategy, but they can't tell you what to do. I mean, which can be very liberating for some people who don't want to sort of like do the exact like trodden path. But for a lot of people, that is very intimidating. And I think the way LSE markets itself to people is, come here, we will give you a career. And I think that that is true, but I think that that is confined to certain degrees. And I think that you have to be cognizant of that. And even with economics or law or anything like that, like, just make those additional efforts from your end from the outset. Don't rely on career services to be like the guiding path in your life. I think especially for people who come from high schools that have like a career services that's really like invested in them, because of the way at least for me, how I remember TISB being structured is like career services or college services, they were like really involved in your life. You're not going to have that at undergrad. And even if you do an economics degree or something, like, make those efforts and those connections and just learning about like what do you want to do and how do you get there, do that independently, and don't sort of like drink the Kool-Aid that LSE will find you a job. Like, you really have to hustle yourself to do what you want to do.
I will definitely echo that sentiment for a place like Brown. And what I'm getting at is that, most places are building career services catered to the norm. And the norm is not an international student from India who's pursuing international relations who eventually wants to be possibly a lawyer, right? Like that's not who they're designing services for. And that's kind of the inspiration for why I even sort of proposed the work that I did at Brown and institutionalized the position that I did. We basically, after graduating from Brown, I became an international student career advisor and helped pilot that position and make that permanent. And it is now. And you will find very few institutions that will take that sort of initiative. And that comes to my second lesson about a place like Brown, is that it really it really takes pride in its students. Like I think that if you're a student at Brown, you're going to be treated like the gem of this universe, and they're going to invest so much time into you and listen to you. And why I say that is that while I was at Brown, I think I really took advantage of that. I worked every job I could, and I'm so glad that I did, because I think all my part-time jobs taught me a lot more than my actual degree did. Why I also mention it is because as soon as you walk out of that door, once you're done with college, you will no more feel like the gem of the universe. You will have to give yourself that personal sort of recognition. And I think that was hard for a lot of us leaving a place like Brown, because it really did invest so much of its time and resources into us, that we came out feeling sort of lacking structure and not understanding what's next. So look at college as a chapter in your life. You have to make whatever happens next, you have to make it happen. And for a place like Brown, I think what I took from it that I value and treasure most is the people. Um, Not just the people that I graduated with, but even just the people that I worked with, the professors. I mean, I can still reach out to them and, just say like, you want to have a Zoom chat? I miss you, let's chat. And that's really how casual and fulfilling your relationships are at a place like Brown. It's been rated as I believe currently is the best undergrad teaching in the US. So, good plug for Brown. Love the school. Go to Brown. I think our answers will be very different. And I think that has to do with the fact that the degrees are so different in terms of the length. My degree was just a year, and that obviously with COVID taking half the year up, it has definitely been more challenging to make, fulfilling social relationships at a place like LSE. Not to say that I don't have really good friends who I've will be graduating with shortly, but you really have to make that effort yourself at the graduate level. I think another social aspect that I wasn't expecting and that I didn't love about the LSU is just the kind of how different the relationships are with your professors or with your career services or with the departments, that kind of thing. They're not as cordial, they're not as warm in comparison to my time at Brown as an undergraduate. So they're a little like your relationship with your academic advisor is a lot more formal. He's not your like bud who you're gonna tell, oh, I'm having a really rough time and I'm having X mental health issue right now. Like, can you advise me? Whereas that's something I could definitely avail at Brown. So you really need to know your place in terms of who you're talking to for what. And you'll have very limited time to have those conversations. So like my academic advising hours would last for 10 minutes, and that's about it. And those are aspects you have to take into consideration. And I guess the last aspect of it is you're in a giant city, you're in a big city, London. If you don't make the effort to make the friends and see the people, it's probably not going to happen. It's very easy to get lost in the big city life, and being somewhat of an extrovert might kind of help, because LSE doesn't necessarily simulate as many social connections as a place like Brown would.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with a lot of that, especially now that I've had sort of the experience of what it's like to be, I guess a grad school freshman in like an American university. And I think, I wonder if what you're saying about Brown translates into American universities generally
Mm,
as well, in that I
yeah.
think that they really take the time to get their students to know each other, and like that's a very important part of the experience. Like at least for the first week, we were really sort of like given the chance to like understand the people we were going to spend the next 3 years with. And I think during undergrad, like LSE's experience is very different in that way. And I think I agree with like, the whole social life aspect in that I think you have to be a bit of an extrovert. It's such a big school, such a big like city, and it is very easy to just kind of get lost in the shuffle. Also with the way undergraduate classes are structured, um, you will have to make the additional effort to like, find the time to hang out with people. It's not something that I think comes as organically as being in the US, like in a US university does. I think campus life is really cherished and fostered here. And obviously with LSE, you just don't have a campus. So, the city is your campus, as people would love to say. So there are benefits to that. And I think, just getting involved in as many things as possible is one way to meet people. And then eventually just, you will have like friendships that you like, people you're closer to or things like that. And then even through your third year, you will keep meeting new people, it will just happen. But yes, it's definitely, I think, more of an effort than it is even here in grad school. I think it's really, in undergrad, you really have to work towards, at least at LSE, like cultivating those relationships with people. And I agree with what Divya said about like your relationships with professors as well. It's a very different system in the UK than it is in the US. I feel like my professors here, like, I mean, I loved a lot of my professors at LSE. They were really great and like great scholars, great academics. But I think the conversation is often a little stilted and professional, and I wouldn't consider them like my friends, like, unless except for maybe like one, and that was because of the way like our professional relationship developed. And I think in the US, like it's a more like open door culture of like, walk in and like talk to your professor, and it's, you don't have to just talk to them about like the degree, like you can talk about their interests and your interests. And so those aspects really differ. Yeah. And I think it's just a matter of navigating that. With LSE, I didn't want to be on a campus university. I think coming out of the ISB, I just wanted no boundaries to anything I was doing. And for me, while it was difficult to initially like push myself to be social in that setting, it also meant coming into grad school, it was really easy to make friends. Like, I was used to like putting myself out there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, most of my experience was very positive in the LSE in that I think, yes, certain degrees are prioritized more with career services, but international relations is taught really well at LSE, and you sort of have the freedom to explore choices. I think in terms of resources, I would say that what really helped was having LSE on your resume as you looked for experiences outside the LSE. Like, I also had multiple like part-time jobs and volunteer positions throughout my time at undergrad. And I think back then I was thinking, even if I don't find out what exactly I want to do, I'll figure out what I hate doing. And then that will be like process of elimination kind of thing. And I think in that way, LSE does help you. I mean, it's not as sort of tailored, like there's no structure to it. In the way that I think if you're doing a law degree at LSE, you're sort of like do a summer like vacation scheme and then do a training contract. I think this is more like find your own way. But having LSE on your resume means people are more willing to like sort of give you an interview and like talk to you and give you a job and things like that. And I think those are really invaluable resources in and of themselves. Is I think if I didn't have LSE on my resume, maybe I would have been precluded from a lot of the choices that I did get to make and a lot of experiences that I did get to have. So I think in that way, it's definitely very useful. And I think with international relations at LSE, at least, I mean, your professors are really great and they have a lot of experience, and you should make the effort to like foster connections with them. And I really wish I had done more of that in undergrad, because the resources are there. It's just not sort of given to you, and you have to kind of seek them out yourself. So I would encourage anyone who does this kind of degree at LSE is, just make an effort to see whatever the school has to offer you, and like if they don't offer it, then make them give it to you, because you should like sort of really leverage that name in the best way you can, and the resources that they have in the best way that you can.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think it boils down to like what you're looking to get out of your undergraduate degree. I mean, I was 17 when I came to college. Like, I didn't know that I had an job in mind at the end of that. I didn't have that kind of clarity. And so when I got to college, for me, it was really just, pursuing what I was interested in, what I could see myself doing long term, being happy in, and what made me the person I wanted to be. Because I didn't know that I wanted to be an investment banker or a doctor or a vet. Like, I just didn't have that clarity. So I think, and frankly, in my IR degree, most of my classes were in political science, because uh, it teaches you to think in a way that makes you think more critically about the world around you, and why things are the way they are. Um, and I think that that's what really like my political science degree did for me, apart from giving me sort of the hard skills of some quantitative qualitative research. And the resources that I could pull were actually my professors. I worked so many research assistantships that I was fortunate to have published material in my professors' books, in 2 or 3 different of books. And I was really lucky that I picked the department wisely, because I was able to work with the former Indian ambassador. Like, you just need to keep an eye out for especially at an American institution, they will list part-time jobs that will sound really good, and they will, you don't even have to pursue them outside your own institution. You can work with these amazing people at your institution itself. What I will say though, from an employability perspective, is while political science gives you this really critical way of thinking and a few of these hard skills, the world we live in right now is very tech skewed. And it doesn't hurt to have some skills that are transferable into that space, whether it's, I mean, I never learned how to, code Python or whatever. I learned R and Stata because that was what was relevant for my degree. But I supplemented that with some sort of digital marketing skills, just because right now to be sort of malleable in the job market is really useful. Um, but what edge you will have over others with a degree like political science is really like the way you think, and to sort of to go back to that analogy of programming for the norm, you can think beyond the norm, and you can really sort of ideate programs or strategies for people who don't fit the norm. So that's kind of what I have to say. If I had the choice, and I kind of did, but I don't know why at the time I thought I didn't, I would have probably worked a little longer before I went into grad school. And it's the advice that I've always gotten, no matter what part-time or full-time job I've worked. I've always been told, like, work before you try and figure out what you want to do next, because I think once you've done some work, you can really kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. Um, I, I think this is a very different situation where she knew from the get-go what she wanted to do. But for someone like me who like still has no idea what the heck I want to do with my life, I think some work experience can really help. I think beyond that, you develop some very sort of basic skills that kind of help you through your grad school degree as well, whether it's having a routine or being organized, or learning to manage up with your manager, to build really good relationships with colleagues, to learn how to make teams work together, that kind of stuff. While they're all soft skills, they really do pay off in the long run. And just being a good person and being a person someone can work with, goes a long way. As much as that sounds really cliche, but it really does.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think even for someone like me who was pretty sure law school was on the cards like at the beginning, I think by the time I got to my third year, it was like this faint memory that I had. And I had like this existential crisis where I was like, do I want to do this because I want to do this? Or am I just doing this because I don't know what happens next? And which is why I felt like taking the time out to work in the field was really important for me, because for me, it's solidified like, this is really what I want to do. And so what I got from the 2 years that I took between undergrad and law school is this clarity of thought. And it was like, no, this isn't just like a because I think what they tell you often with law school admissions is, oh, like, don't just do this because, you finished an arts degree and you don't know what you want to do next. And I think having work experience gives you the clarity that the legal field is what you want to do. And at least for me, I realized international law was something I was really interested in, but there were certain experiences I didn't want to do per se, like right after graduating. I spent 8 months at the International Criminal Court in like interning with the Office of the Prosecutor. And that's not an experience I necessarily want to go back to right out of law school. I then spent like 6 months in India working with like direct client services in a small NGO. And I realized I liked client services. I want to like have that experience. And so I think having those sort of like additional data points as you come into grad school, law school, whatever it may be, is really useful, because I think often what happens in an academic situation, if you go from one to the other, is that you've never really had the time to introspect and to really understand why you want to do a degree. I think when we go from high school to undergrad, it's like, well, these are my interests. And then after that, there's no set path out there for you. So you really have to take the time to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and work experiences can really help with that. And I think whether you choose to spend a year at one place or you choose to spend 2 years, in my case, as I did at 3 different places, they will all be useful data points going into your grad school degree. So I really, really encourage like taking the time off to work, and you will know when that's come to an end and when like you're ready to go to grad school. Because at the end of my experiences, I was ready. I knew that it was time to go to grad school. So yeah, I just highly recommend taking time out between 2 degrees. I think I have like trauma from like preparing for the LSAT. I'll never forget it. But I mean, so I'll think about the first thing. I mean, I had no idea what coming into grad school in the US looked like, to be honest. And I think I have been fortunate in that I have been able to figure it out. And I think that is also a product of what you learn during undergrad and the experiences you have after that, is that they're often, I mean, and again, I think this is very specific to each grad school degree as they come. Like, I mean, law school exams are very different from undergraduate exams, be it in the US or in the UK. Like, it's just a completely different way of testing. And that's something everyone has to learn. No one comes into law school prepared to give those kind of exams. And you will figure it out. As much as it seems like you won't, you will. So I didn't really do anything to prepare per se. I mean, I don't want to generalize to other experiences. So I think it's so individual specific. For me, I didn't do anything. Had I gone to another grad degree, maybe I wouldn't have done anything either. I don't know if there's a way to prepare. Preparing for the LSAT, I would say, I mean, it was challenging because I was working the entire time I was studying for the LSAT. So I would have a 9 to 5 work day, and then I would have to spend 3 hours or 4 hours studying for the LSAT. And I think for a lot of people, they choose to give it while they're still in undergrad. And I think if you have that option, I would encourage you to take it, because your brain is wired to like think, like do academic things, and your score lasts for like 5 years. So it's just good to get it out of the way if you can. Because it does become more difficult as time goes on to like motivate yourself to study. And for me, it sort of became the last hurdle I had to cross. Like, I had everything else ready, I just didn't have the LSAT score I wanted. And in terms of actual preparation, like, there's so many resources on the internet. Like, I was not in any city that had LSAT tutoring. Like, and I think my counterparts in the US probably had that option, is that they could go to like an LSAT prep center. And I couldn't. Like, I was living in the Netherlands when I started studying, and there was no LSAT center there. But it was fine. Like, there's enough resources on the internet, and it's a fairly straightforward exam once you kind of get a handle on it. But if you have the option to do it during undergrad, I would encourage that, because it is very, very difficult, like when you're working, to try and do that at the end of the day. It does take a lot of your like brain energy to work through those questions, and you don't want to be doing that at 5 o'clock on like a Monday evening. So